Okay, guys. A very good morning to you. My name is Kamlesh Sajnani. I happen to be the managing director. Just happen to be the managing director of IMS. It's a lovely morning wherever you are. Beautiful. You are safe, sound, and today we are going to talk to two very eminent personalities from UPES. UPES, as you all know, is a university in Dehradun. Beautiful place. I've been there multiple times. Some of you may be from there or from that area, surrounded by beauty all along Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh and stuff like that. I've even cycled in the region with the BASF. They are pretty tough guys, but it was fun. But anyway, we are here to talk about law rather than my cycling, right? So UPES has multiple departments, and it's wonderful to have a university. You see, the university system is a little different than our college system. College is individualized, right? It gives you a singularity in terms of faculty and subjects. But when you go to an university, you have multiple departments that are working within the same campus, and which gives you an opportunity to interact with people from different and varied departments. Now, the advantage to that is that you can have a multidisciplinary friendship. You can have multidisciplinary inputs. You can appreciate how other departments think. And I'm going to ask that question later to Charu, whether they have a facility to stay over there, because to me, to be living in a campus is one of the most brightest and lifelong experiences that you can ever have. And if you ever get an opportunity to go and study and live, it will be fantastic. What I call that is known as immersive education. Okay. But anyway, today we will talk more about law. So UPES has about 560 seats in their department of law, and they have multiple programs. Very interesting. So they have BA LLB in energy law, criminal law, labor law, constitutional law, which is amazing. They have another one which specializes with investment banking, corporate law, international trade, banking, finance, and insurance. Okay. They have the next one in with a specialization in taxation, media and entertainment, legal compliance, and secretarial practices. One more in intellectual property rights, food, health, and environment law, medical and forensic law. Forensic, wow. Okay. And they have two programs which are linked to their BTech actually. So they have a computer science engineering with an LLB in cyber law, and they have a BTech energy technology with an IPR law. So I think these are pretty different and quite interesting areas. So today we have, to begin with, we have Professor Ashutosh Tripathi. Okay, he is a BCom from Allahabad University. He has also done his LLB from the University of Allahabad. And then he went on to do a post-graduation in law, which is an LLM from NLSIU Bangalore, which is kind of up there as far as institutions in law are concerned. And now he's doing a PhD. Okay, so wow, this man is really educated. I mean, I'm a little scared. Okay, anyway, and he's been published in multiple international journals. And his area of specialization is human rights and international law. He's also been a part of many international conferences, and he's spoken and presented research papers on national and international norms and rules for working with children. He's presented a research paper in diplomatic immunity and human rights. What happened to Adnan Shogi, right, in Turkey, right? So these are very interesting topics. And, they are also going to talk, Professor Ashutosh is also going to talk to you about landmark judgments. This is going to be very exciting. I have a lot of, I have read up on a little bit of what law does, and sometimes there are weird laws also, and I'm going to talk about that. We're going to make it a little more fun. But he's going to talk about landmark judgments, right? And after that, Charu will come on, and she will tell you about the admission process of UPES and how exciting a place it is, the admission criteria, basically the logistical questions, right? And I will keep on intervening. Guys, if you have any questions that you want to ask me or you want to ask the panel here, just put it on the Q&A section. We will try to answer as many questions as you want. And this video will later on be available on the IMS YouTube also, right? So Professor Ashutosh Tripathi, your opportunity to speak to the students.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I think we will start now. So basically, today we are going to discuss about certain top landmark judgments of India that every CLAT student must be knowing. So before I start, there are certain things which I want to brought to your notice. For example, what is a landmark judgment? Every year, Supreme Court gives hundreds of judgments. Every year, Supreme Court gives hundreds of judgments. And since its inception from 26 Jan 1950, they have given so many judgments. So what I think that sometimes my student, when I teach them the constitutional law in the class and in the exam, in every judgment, some of my students will write that in a landmark judgment, Supreme Court said so and so. But that is not the case. Every judgment of the Supreme Court is not the landmark judgment. So always keep in mind that every judgment of the Supreme Court is not landmark. What makes a judgment landmark are two things. One is that how it is going to be changing the interpretation of the Constitution. Is it bringing something new? Is it bringing some new rules of interpretation? Second thing is that how this judgment is going to influence certain other enactments like IPC, CRPC or anything. So judgments of the Supreme Court can be divided into two main things. One is those judgments of the Supreme Court which are pertaining to the Constitution. That is our main focus. And second is those judgments of the Supreme Court that deals with the interpretation of some or other sections of the other laws. For example, IPC, recently we have, say, Section 377 judgment of the Supreme Court in the IPC related to the homosexuality and many other things. Before I start this, I want to brought to your notice certain articles of the Constitution which is dealing with the Supreme Court. So for example, the one of the article is Article 141. So Article 141 is basically say that every judgment of the Supreme Court shall be binding on the every court. So whatever is said by the Supreme Court shall be binding on each and every court. This is the reason why Supreme Court judgment is binding. The main reason why Supreme Court judgment is binding, it is given in Article 141 of the Constitution. Second thing is Article 142. So Article 142 say that Supreme Court can pass any order, any decree, what they think fit for doing complete justice. So for doing complete justice, in any case, the Supreme Court can go beyond the written rules and regulations. The Supreme Court can surpass any rules, any laws for giving a complete justice in any of the case. I will come to this in one of the judgment. Most recently is the Ayodhya judgment, in which the Supreme Court have used Article 142 of the Constitution. So these are the two main articles which makes the Supreme Court the powerful organ. And do remember, unlike Article 142, there is no parallel provision anywhere in the world. So even the USA Supreme Court does not have this power to pass any order for doing complete justice. So this is a very, very unique power which is given to the Supreme Court of India under Article 142 of the Constitution. So kindly remember Article 141 and 142 of the Constitution. That is very, very relevant for the Supreme Court. If we compare this with the USA, so kindly go through the USA Constitution. It's a very, very small Constitution comprising of 8 articles and close to 30 amendments. So it is one of the smallest Constitution in the world right now. So some people say that which is more powerful organ, be it the legislature, be it the executive, be it the judiciary. So some people say that legislature is more important. Why? Because legislature will make the law, executive will implement the law, then only judiciary will come into picture. I hope you're understanding. I'm saying that till the time there is no law, there is no role of judiciary. So that's why some people say that legislatures are more important. So there's a huge debate that which is more powerful organ. That is a different debate. But in India, technically, the Constitution never say that which is important, which is not important. Constitution say that each and every organ is as much important as the other organ, and both are, and every organ is supreme in their own field. The Supreme Court is supreme because it is the highest court of the country. That is, its judgment is binding on each and every one. That is what is written in Article 141. And second is Article 142, which say that for doing complete justice, they can pass any order or direction. Third thing which I want to brought to your notice is jurisdiction part. So there are different ways of approaching the Supreme Court. So one of the most important thing is Article 32. I think you must be knowing that Article 32 say that for enforcing your fundamental right, you can directly approach the Supreme Court of India. So this is the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. So if your fundamental right is violated, you can directly approach the Supreme Court of India under Article 32 of the Constitution. So you must have seen in the past few days that some people have approached the Supreme Court directly on the issue of migrant, that there's an issue of migrant workers, and some people have filed a PIL under Article 32, and later on the Supreme Court have issued certain directions day before yesterday. So you must have seen that how this Article 32 is used. One of the other main article is Article 13 Clause 1 and 13 Clause 2. Why I'm telling you Article 13 Clause 1 and 13 Clause 2? Because of the simple reason that it say that Parliament cannot make any law which is inconsistent with your fundamental right. So this is the restriction on the law-making power of the Parliament. So Parliament have power to make law, but Parliament cannot make any law which violates your fundamental right. So in other words, we can say that fundamental rights is a restriction on the law-making power of the Parliament. Otherwise, Parliament can make any law. So if they can make any law, then they can act in a very, very arbitrary manner. They can violate our rights. So Part 3 of the Constitution, that is the fundamental right chapter, it acts as a restriction on the law-making power of the Parliament. So Parliament cannot make any law which violates our fundamental right. If they are making any law which violates our fundamental right, then the Supreme Court is there under Article 32. You can approach Supreme Court under Article 32, and Supreme Court will say that this law is unconstitutional. And as I told you already, under Article 141, whatever is said by the Supreme Court, that is final, and it is binding on each and everyone, including the government and Parliament. Okay, Tushar, next slide. So now I come to this. There are certain things, because in a short span of time, it is very, very difficult to cover all and everything related to the Supreme Court. But one of the most important thing is related to the life and personal liberty. So life and personal liberty is given in your Article 21 of the Constitution. It says that no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except by a procedure established by law. So in 1950, just after the Constitution came into force, Supreme Court started working, and there was a case filed named as A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras. So this case, A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras, was heard by the Supreme Court. Why this case is relevant? In this case, the Supreme Court said that each and every fundamental right are independent from each other. So there is no connection between Article 19, 20, and 21. So each and every fundamental right are absolute in their own sense, and there is no interconnection between all these fundamental rights. Supreme Court also said one more important thing, that is there's a difference between procedure established by law and due process of law. So there's a difference between procedure established by law and due process of law. So in USA Constitution, they use the term due process of law. In India, we use the term procedure established by law. So in short, I can tell you the difference. Otherwise, it's a very, very separate topic for a discussion. Procedure established by law means that Article 21 is saying that no one shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except by a procedure established by law, which means through law, you can deprive anyone's life and liberty. So through law, you can deprive anyone's life and liberty. If there's a law which say that if you commit a crime, you will be hanged, so your life will be gone. If you commit a crime, you will be in jail, so liberty will be curtailed. So if the Supreme Court is evaluating this, then the Supreme Court will only see that whether there is a law or not. Supreme Court will not go into the question that whether it's a just law or unjust law. For example, I give you one example of unjust law. Suppose a person have committed a theft of 1,000 rupees. Suppose a person have committed a theft of 1,000 rupees. So can we send him a jail for 10 years? Suppose the IPC is saying that if any person commits a theft of rupees 1,000, he will be sent to jail for 10 years. So any reasonable person will say that this law is unjust because the punishment is not proportionate to the act. So there should be a balance between the crime which you have done and the punishment which you have given. So in this case, there is no balance. So crime is less, but punishment is very harsh. But if you go by the due procedure established by law, then the Supreme Court will say that it is perfectly fine, because at the end, the law is saying that rupees 1,000 theft, 10 years jail. So we are not going to entertain anything, and the person should be sent to jail for 10 years. The Supreme Court will only see whether there is a law or not. That is what the procedure established by law is. This judgment of the Supreme Court was later on overruled by the Supreme Court in the year 1976 in a very, very famous case named as Menka Gandhi versus Union of India. I hope you all know who is Menka Gandhi. Right now, she is a member of parliament. Earlier, she was a minister. And of course, she works lots in the animal protection and animal welfare thing. So this is a case about 1975. At that time, Menka Gandhi used to be a journalist. Menka Gandhi used to be a journalist, and she was trying to go abroad. She was trying to go abroad for a conference. And do remember, this is the period when, for the first time in India, we have a non-Congress government led by Morarji Desai. So Morarji Desai was the prime minister. We are talking about just after the emergency. You must be knowing the emergency. So Morarji Desai government somehow prevented her from going abroad by using the Passport Act. There was a Passport Act which say that the section 10 of the Passport Act say that the government of India can impound anyone's passport without giving them any reason. So which means government can take away your passport without giving you any reason. So if you ask why you are taking my passport, the government is not bound to tell you. So this was challenged by Menka Gandhi, saying that this law is very, very authoritative because it is depriving my life and personal liberty. It is not following the due process of law. This law is unjust. This law is not reasonable. This law is arbitrary. That's Passport Act. So she is challenging what was said in A.K. Gopalan case. And in this case of Menka Gandhi, Supreme Court overruled its decision in the A.K. Gopalan case and held that procedure established by law means due process of law. So from now onwards, if anyone's life is being deprived, there should be a law, but also there should be a just law. So this depriving of someone's passport without giving them any reason, it's not a just law, it's an arbitrary law. Although it's a law, why it's a law? Because it is enacted by parliament. So every law which is enacted by the parliament may not be a just law, may not be a reasonable law. Supreme Court is saying that this law is unjust law, this law is unreasonable, therefore we are striking down this particular section. And Supreme Court said that there is a direct connection between Article 19, 20 and 21. So Supreme Court is saying there is a connection between many of the fundamental rights, and every fundamental right should not be read in isolation. It should be read in connection with the rest of the fundamental rights. And later on, the Supreme Court is saying there's a concept of golden triangle. Golden triangle means Article 14, 19, and 21. So golden triangle technically means that if you touch one article, suppose you are touching Article 14, so automatically you will touch Article 19 and 21 and vice versa. So it will keep on going like this. So this judgment is very, very important. That is of the Menka Gandhi versus Union of India. Now I come to this judgment of ADM Jabalpur versus Shivkant Shukla. I hope you must be knowing this case. This case is during national emergency of 1975. So during that time, what happened? Any person, most of the opposition member, they were put into the jail by the government, and they were not produced before the magistrate within 24 hours. The normal laws say that within 24 hours, every person should be produced before the magistrate. But Indira Gandhi invoked Article 352, that is the national emergency, and thereafter she suspended all the fundamental rights. So the government suspended all the fundamental rights, which means even if your fundamental right is violated, you cannot go to the Supreme Court under Article 32. So this was challenged in ADM Jabalpur case, and Supreme Court said that government is right. If fundamental right is suspended, you cannot come to rescue to us. So we are not going to help you if fundamental right is suspended. And people say this is the worst judgment given by the Supreme Court of India. This judgment was given by 4:1. So 4 judge said that your fundamental right will remain suspended till the time emergency is there. One judge, the famous dissenting opinion of Justice H.R. Khanna, he gave a dissenting opinion. He said that you cannot suspend fundamental right. How can you suspend fundamental right? If you suspend fundamental right, then technically the whole purpose of constitution is defeated. But as we know that in India, the judgment is by the majority. So his judgment was a part of dissenting opinion, although later on that dissenting opinion will lead to many changes in the constitution. In life and personal liberty, one of the other important case is Justice Puttaswamy versus Union of India. This is the judgment, very recent judgment. It is decided by a 9-judge bench. So in this, the Supreme Court emphatically for the first time held that right to privacy is a part of right to life. So right to privacy is a part of right to life. That is what the Supreme Court is saying in this particular judgment. And the best part of this judgment is unanimous. So all the 9 judges are saying that right to privacy is a part of right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 of the Constitution, which means from now onwards, privacy is a part of right to life. And this is the reason why many people are raising certain concern regarding the Arogya Setu, which the government is saying that you have to install. Of course, it will help in tracking the people and many other things, but some people are saying that it is violating my privacy. That's a different matter. But for your information, you should be knowing that this is a 9-judge bench. And do remember, 9-judge bench are a very, very rarity in India. The 9-judge bench is saying privacy is a part of right to life, and it is a part of Article 21 of the Constitution. Okay, so this is the 4 main cases on the life and personal liberty, according to me. There are many other cases, but keeping in mind the time, I am only discussing these 4 cases. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we come to the topic of reservation. So reservation is a very, very critical topic, and we all have different opinions about reservation and many other things. So first case which is related to the reservation is Champakam Dorairajan versus State of Madras, that is of the 1950. So for the first time, the issue of reservation was raised in the Supreme Court in this particular case. And the last case which settled all the cases, issues related to the reservation was Indira Sahni versus Union of India. That is of the 1993 or 4, I think. In between, there are many other cases. For example, there's a case named as Balaji versus State of Mysore. There are many cases, but I am only telling you these 2 cases because one is the beginning and the second is almost settling each and every issue. So in Champakam Dorairajan versus State of Madras, the Supreme Court have to deal with this issue of reservation. And do remember, in this case, Supreme Court say that we have a directive principle of state policy. So in directive principle of state policy, there is a article you can write down and you can go through. There's an article called as Article 46. So if you read Article 46, it says that promotion of educational standard of scheduled caste, scheduled tribes and other people. So which means it is one of the responsibility of the state to promote the educational standard of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. The basic difference between fundamental right and DPSP is that fundamental rights are enforceable by law, as I told you under Article 32. DPSP are not enforceable by law. It's up to the state whether to enforce it or not. So what happened in this case? And do remember one thing, at that point of time, we don't have Article 15 Clause 4 in the Constitution. So kindly go through and you will find Article 15 Clause 4, which right now deals with reservation in educational institution. That was not a part of the original Constitution. So Article 15 Clause 4 was not part of the original Constitution. So State of Madras. Why State of Madras? Because we are talking about a time when the state was not reorganized. So what we call right now is Tamil Nadu, that is State of Madras basically. What we call now is State of Karnataka. Before 1956, it was the State of Mysore. There was a State of Travancore. So after 1956, there was a state reorganization happened in India. And that's why there's a change in the name of many of the states. But at that time, there was a State of Madras. The State of Madras implemented Article 46 of the Constitution and say that we will be giving reservation to certain people belonging to the scheduled caste and everything in medical colleges. So this was challenged. This was challenged by Champakam Dwai Rajan. She was a student. She was a Brahmin technically. She was not getting admission because of this reservation policy. So she challenged this in the Supreme Court, saying that it is a violation of Article 14, that is the right to equality. Article 15 Clause 1, which say that there should be no discrimination on the basis of the caste and every other thing. So she is saying Article 14 and 15 Clause 1 is violated if you give reservation. Thereafter, state is saying that we are implementing Article 46 of the Constitution. So therefore, we are doing our duty. But Supreme Court in this case is saying that fundamental rights are enforceable by law and DPSP are not enforceable by law. Therefore, in case there's a conflict between fundamental right and DPSP, the fundamental right will get a preference over the DPSP. And Supreme Court struck down this reservation policy of the State of Madras. Thereafter, what the Parliament have done, the Parliament have amended the Constitution, that is the First Amendment. And now the Article 15 Clause 4 was added by the First Amendment. And right now it says that there should be special provision for scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and other educationally backward class of people. So basically, to overcome this decision of the Supreme Court, the Parliament amended the Constitution. That is what the Champakam Dwai Rajan case is all about. One of the leading case on reservation is Indira Sahni versus Union of India. It is decided by 9-judge bench. So this case settled many things. For example, what should be the quantum of reservation? How many seats should be reserved? What is the criteria of giving reservation? What is the criteria of giving reservation? What is the quantum of reservation? Is there any maximum limit? Because the Constitution is not saying anything about the limit. So what is the quantum of reservation? So in this case, the Supreme Court is saying reservation in normal circumstances should not exceed more than 50%. Reservation should not exceed more than 50%. And Supreme Court is saying one of the criteria to determine that beneficiaries of the reservation will always be the caste. So without caste, a person cannot be a backward in India. So this is changed by 103 amendment. So kindly go through the 103 amendment also, which is the most recent amendment in the Constitution. And this amendment is basically saying that 10% reservation on the economic criteria, which means whether you are a scheduled caste, ST or anything or general category, if you are economically backward, then you can get certain reservation. That is 103 amendment. This is already challenged in the Supreme Court of India. So this is all about the Indira Sahni case. Okay, next slide. So now we will be coming to the other main thing, that is talking about the amendment and fundamental rights. This is one of the other important thing which you should be knowing. There are series of cases: Kameshwar Prasad versus State of Rajasthan, Shankari Prasad versus Union of India, Sajjan Kumar versus State of Rajasthan, IC Golaknath versus State of Punjab, Keshwan Bharti versus State of Kerala, Minerva Mills versus Union of India, Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. So I'm not going to deal all the cases, but the basic issue in all these cases was that Article 368 of the Constitution provides for the amendment, which means Parliament can amend the Constitution. The Parliament have a power to amend the Constitution. Why we need amendment? Because Constitution is not a static document. It's a dynamic document. So it should keep on changing as per the needs of the society. So there's a huge difference between what was the Constitution on 26 Jan 1950 and what is the Constitution on, say, 31st May 2020. So we have amended almost 103 times, which means we have changed the Constitution 103 times. So amendment is an essential part of the Constitution. And Article 368 deals with amendment, which means Parliament can amend the Constitution. But Article 368 is silent about the issue whether you can amend the fundamental right or not. Whether you can amend the fundamental right or not. Imagine Parliament is taking away all your fundamental right because they can amend the Constitution. So this issue is not clear in the Constitution. Therefore, this issue was raised before the Supreme Court in number of cases. For example, in Sankri Prasad and Sajjan Kumar, in these two cases, the Supreme Court is saying that Parliament can amend any part of the Constitution, including the fundamental right, which means Parliament can take away your fundamental right if they want. The power of amendment is absolute. There is no restriction. They can take away any of your fundamental right. So Parliament can amend any part of the Constitution, including fundamental right. Do remember this case, IC Golaknath versus State of Punjab. It's a 11-judge bench judgment of the Supreme Court of India around 1968-69. In this case, the Supreme Court overruled its decision in the Sajjan Kumar and Sankri Prasad case. So in this case, the Supreme Court is saying that Parliament can amend the Constitution. There is no doubt about it, but Parliament cannot amend the fundamental rights. The Supreme Court is saying that Parliament cannot amend the fundamental rights. That is the most important thing in the Golaknath case, that Parliament cannot amend the fundamental rights. So this case is relevant because it is saying that Parliament cannot amend the fundamental right. In previous cases, the Supreme Court saying that Parliament can amend fundamental right. Thereafter, the landmark judgment comes, that is the Keshwan Bharti versus State of Kerala. People say this is the most important judgment given by the Supreme Court of India. And this is true also. So since its inception till now, this is the most important judgment which is given by the Supreme Court of India. It was announced on 24th April 1973. So the judgment was delivered on 24th April 1973. Why I remember this date? Because of one main reason, that on this day it's a birthday of Sachin Tendulkar also. So as we know that he is being worshipped or idolized by many people. So some people say that 24th April 1973 is a very, very special day for the India, because Keshwan Bharti case was born. That is the theory of basic structure, which saved the Constitution. And of course, Sachin Tendulkar was born, which takes cricket and many other things to the next level. So this judgment came on 24th April 1973. So in this case, the Supreme Court is saying that we accept that you have a power of amendment, but Parliament can amend the Constitution. So there was a question, there was a debate between the two parties. And for your information, this case was argued by some great people like H.M. Shirvai and many other people. So in this case, the Supreme Court is saying like this, that who is the creator? Parliament created the Constitution, or Constitution is creating the Parliament? So everyone said that Constitution is creating the Parliament. Now the Supreme Court is asking this question, that whether a thing which is created by the Constitution can destroy it. Answer is no. Because you owe your birth to the Constitution, and now you can say that we are removing everything from the Constitution. The Supreme Court say that you cannot amend the basic structure of the Constitution. And what is basic structure? That is left unanswered, and Supreme Court said that it will be determined from case to case. So from time to time, we will determine which is a part of basic structure or not. But Supreme Court makes it very, very clear that every fundamental right is not a basic structure. And there may be something which is not fundamental right, but it's a basic structure. For example, independence of judiciary, it is not a fundamental right, but it's a basic structure. Is it clear? Similarly, the next case which I want to brought to notice, Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. Why I'm saying this case? Because in this case, what happened, as we know, Indira Gandhi won the election in Raebareli in 1973. Thereafter, Allahabad High Court said that her election is void because she violated certain rules and regulations. Thereafter, the parliament brought amendment into the constitution, that is the 39th amendment, and held that you cannot challenge the election of the prime minister, president anywhere in India. So once a person is elected prime minister, you cannot challenge her election. This was being done to save the position of Indira Gandhi. Is it clear? So this 39th amendment was challenged, and 39th amendment was challenged, and Supreme Court struck down this 39th amendment, saying that judicial review is a part of the basic structure. So you cannot take away the judicial review power of the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court struck down the 39th amendment. Now I come to the other certain thing miscellaneous related to the constitution. These are other main cases which you should be knowing. For example, there's one case named as SR Bombay versus Union of India. So in this case, Supreme Court said that secularism is a basic feature of the Indian constitution. In SR Bombay case, Supreme Court is saying secularism is a basic feature of the Indian constitution. Then there's a case named as Muhammad Ahmad Khan versus Union of India, and you must be knowing there's a case named as Shah Banu. The Shah Banu case relates to whether the Muslim women have a right to get maintenance under 125 of CRPC, because the Muslim personal laws say that they can get maintenance only up to a certain time. CRPC is a secular law, therefore she should be getting maintenance under the CRPC. The Supreme Court said that CRPC is a secular law and 125 of CRPC deals with maintenance, so it should be applicable on each and everyone, be it Hindu, be it Muslim. That's a different thing. After this judgment, Parliament amended the constitution and Parliament brought a new law to overturn this decision. Third is Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan. This case is very, very relevant because of the simple reason that it brought the famous Vishakha guidelines, which deals with the sexual harassment at the workplaces. So it tells the guidelines that what is the duty of the employer and everything related to that thing. So there is a thing. Similarly, there is a case named as Shaira Banu versus Union of India. In this case, related to the triple talaq case, that triple talaq is unconstitutional and all these things. Similarly, there's the Indian Young Lawyers Association case, which say that you have to Sabrimala case that women should be allowed to enter into the temple. So these are certain recent cases. Joseph Sain versus Union of India. In this case, Supreme Court said that Section 497 of the IPC deals with adultery is unconstitutional. Similarly, there is a Common Cause versus Union of India euthanasia case in which Supreme Court permits the passive euthanasia. Similarly, we have Beruberi case in which the Supreme Court said that preamble is a part of the constitution. PUCL versus Union of India, Nota case. Nota means that none of the above. So when you go to vote, you have an option to choose none of the above. Similarly, this famous case you must be knowing, Mohammad Siddiqui through legal rights versus Mahant. This is Ayodhya case, which is the most recent one, dealing with the dispute at Ayodhya. Shatrughan Chauhan versus Union of India deals with the issue of pardoning power. The Supreme Court say that if there is undue delay in giving the pardon, then we can convert death penalty into life imprisonment. Muhammad Hanif Qureshi versus State of Bihar deals with your cow slaughtering. So Supreme Court said that cow slaughtering is not essential part of Islam. Therefore, state can make law which can prevent the cow slaughtering. This is the most recent case, Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India, related to the Jammu and Kashmir. So in this case, Supreme Court said that internet is a part of freedom of speech and expression. The right to internet is a part of freedom of speech and expression. That is what the Supreme Court is saying in this case, Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India. It's a 2020 case relating to the Jammu and Kashmir. And this is the other case, Central Public Information Officer versus Subhash Chandra Agarwal. So in this case, the Supreme Court is saying that the office of the CGI, the office of the Chief Justice of India, can come under the Right to Information Act. At last, I am telling you these two cases. These are from the other statutes. One is the KM Nanavati versus State of Maharashtra. I hope you must be knowing Nanavati. There was a movie also, Rustam, made on this. So in Nanavati case, in this case, basically marked the end of the jury system in India. Before this case, we were having a system called as a jury system. So this case marks the end of the jury system in India. And the one of the other case which you should be knowing is Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab. That is the case dealing with the rarest of rare. We say that death penalty should only be given in rarest of rare cases. You cannot give death penalty in any murder cases. In any murder cases, you will give death penalty only in rarest of rare cases. So this is all about from me. If any question, you can pinpoint to in the question and answer thing. Thank you.
Professor Ashutosh, that was phenomenal. I did not know that there were so many judgments and they were so important. Thank you for enlightening me. Okay, I'm sure the students have kind of quite liked this, and are these also relevant from a test perspective? All that you just now gave them this information on?
Yes, because it's very hard to pick the cases because there's so many cases and the time is very, very less. But whatever case I picked, I think that is relevant for any examination.
Okay, then for the students, if they are interested, and for you at the end, I will open up a surprise, right? Sure. And I will tell you what the surprise is, and hopefully they'll gain more from you. Okay, now for me, tell me a couple of questions. Very recently, since we were talking about this Arogya Setu app.
Yes.
And there is this whole controversy about on COVID that government is going to monitor you by giving you these apps.
Yes.
How much of it you think infringes on, or the risk of infringement on our fundamental rights is?
Okay, basically the whole issue is related to the privacy.
Charu, you have to shut your mute it, please. Yeah, thank you.
So whole issue.
Yeah, go ahead, Professor.
Whole issue is related to the privacy. Yeah. As I told you in the Puttaswamy case, Supreme Court said right to privacy is a part of right to life and personal liberty. As far as Arogya Setu is concerned, because at the end we have to keep in mind no fundamental right is absolute. Every fundamental right comes with certain restriction, but the restriction should be reasonable. It should not be unreasonable. So there's certain fear regarding the Arogya Setu app among the people. But if you have seen the recent news where the government have open sourced it, which means the government is telling you the whole system of Arogya Setu, that how it will work. This will go a long way in imposing the trust on the issue of the Arogya Setu. Second thing, what the government has done very well, that they have said that anyone in the whole world, if they found anything which is wrong and any bug and anything, they can come to us. We will give them reward also. If you think that it is infringing on my privacy, and you can prove it that it can be used for many other purpose, surveillance and many other things like police state and many other things. If you are able to prove it, then we will give you certain money also. That's a good thing which is done by the government in the recent times. It will impose a lot of trust and transparency in the whole system. But at the end of the day, we have to keep in mind that we are not living in a normal time. So government needs certain mechanism also to keep a check on this disease. And it's not a mean achievement that more than 11 crore people have already downloaded it.
Very nice. So, that's fantastic. Okay, so this is interesting, and I would like to make it a little light if everybody is happy with that. There are very, very weird laws also, right? So yes. I found that out in the morning. I did not know this, all right? But now I have found that there is a law which says attempted suicide is illegal, but not if it is successful. Yes. That means you try to commit suicide and you die. You are fine. But otherwise, in a blatant undermining of the basic ideals of democracy, Section 309 of the Penal Code makes sure you are punished if you don't suicide correctly.
Yes, but government is now, there's some changes which is being done. The government is saying that when a person commits a suicide, so
Right.
don't punish him, treat
Right.
it like a disease, because when a
Okay.
person commits a suicide, trying to commit a suicide,
Right.
then he's not a normal person, he's suffering through a disease.
Very good.
So
Okay.
the person need to be taken to the cured thing, not
Okay.
to be punished.
Okay, then there is another one which says the unlucky lottery. As per the Indian Treasure Trove Act, it makes one for one unfortunate lottery. According to this 1878 law, chancing upon unclaimed money amounting to more than rupees 11 on the road and failing to report the same to the local authority might result in prosecution. They don't want to change this. Okay.
Basically, for example, I give you one more example. Right
Yeah.
now, the India is fighting this COVID with
Right.
the Act of 1897.
Okay.
There is the
Very good.
Epidemic Disease Act of 1897,
Right.
which the government is using right now to deal with this COVID thing.
Okay. But there is one more. Nobody can fly kites in this country unless you have a permit. In this another ridiculous law, the Indian Aircraft Act of 1934 considers a kite to also be an aircraft, thus making it necessary to get a flying permit for one. Anyway, I'm just joking. But I would like you to tell me how important was Dr. Ambedkar's contribution towards our constitution.
Okay, no doubt, Dr. Ambedkar was one of the most important person in the whole framing of the Indian Constitution.
Right.
But I want to tell the students that at the end of the day, when someone asks that who enacted the Constitution, the normal answer comes Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. But I was to tell you that this is not the right answer, because at the end of the day, if you're giving all the credit to one person, then you are undermining the credit of the other 290 persons who were there in the Constituent Assembly. Of course, it's not an act of single person, but
Right.
no doubt he was the first among the equals. He was the
Right.
first among the equals because he helped in drafting the constitution. But same way, there was a very, very great person named as Sir B.N. Rao. He was a constitutional advisor to the Constituent Assembly. So he prepared the first draft of the Indian Constitution and presented to the Assembly. And thereafter, the debate and everything started. And then Ambedkar's role is very, very important. Because he was knowledgeable, he was having the knowledge of politics, economics, and so many degrees.
Yeah.
So then he helped in refining and redrafting it again and again. So no doubt, single most important person is Ambedkar. But at the same time, there are so many other persons whose role should not be ignored.
Undermined, yeah.
Yes.
Very well. It was wonderful. Thank you very much, Professor Ashutosh Tripathi. So, guys, this is, you have to meet Charu Srivastav. She is the assistant professor. She is also a BA LLB, Faculty of Law, University of Allahabad. She is an LLM in business laws, right? She is also pursuing her PhD, and she has also done a lot of research and publications. Her area of specialization is something that I love: business laws and intellectual property rights, right? She's also, I think, good person to talk to about cyber laws. But, today she is here with a purpose. She is here to explain to us how UPES is a fundamentally fantastic institution for studying law. What is the admission process? How does the program work? When is the last dates, and how you can apply and how you can join? Am I right, Charu? Or
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
wonderful, wonderful. And so nice to have a beautiful face early in the morning.
Thank you, Kamlesh. Kamlesh, I would like to just make a small correction.
Sure.
The Charu Srivastav you were introducing is a professor in the same campus,
Right.
UPS, and my designation is I am Deputy Director Admissions.
Oh, okay. It's not mentioned here. That's why. Anyway, never mind. So
So
you are the
I
deputy
take care
director.
of the admission part.
Oh, lovely. So
Yeah.
I have to influence
Yeah,
you
yeah,
to
and
get
I am
into
an
the
alumni.
institution. Yeah, okay. Guys,
So-
remember, Charu, okay, you want to get in, just write to her, ma'am, please let me in. Okay.
So I take care of the admissions for law, and it's a very, very nice experience to be at UPS at whatever level you are. Even I think as a student, it is the most fantastic place to be, and there are a number of reasons to be, really being happy about being a part of UPS as a student and as somebody who's working for UPS. It's completely a pleasure to be in that university. It's a beautiful campus of 44 acres, and this is known to be one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. This is one of the, I would say, when it comes to technology, we are most upgraded campuses in the country, much before the COVID lockdown happened. In fact, before Holi itself, we went online into our teaching, and we were much, that awareness was there that this COVID is going to actually impact, and our students should remain at home, and they should, be studying technologically using the only online platform. So we had world's best technologies already, up and running much before the lockdown happened. So when it comes to technology, we are par excellence, and we are, much ahead of any other university in the country. And one reason of being are so, for technology is that we are a part of global university systems. Now, global university systems is the largest body, a consortium of universities in the world. We've got 28 universities across the world, and we have got universities in UK, Germany, Singapore, Canada, America. So, and UPS is strategically a partner with GUS. So every student who is studying law with us goes for 1 month of internship in any of these preferred universities, and this is absolutely free. The students don't need to pay any tuition amount or anything if they want to do the internship in our colleges in UK or Berlin or Vancouver. So that's a very amazing experience, studying law in these international universities. At the same time, if you're going for your LLM in these GUS universities, then your tuition fee is just 50%. That's another very big advantage of studying with UPS. And when it comes to faculty ratio, we are, as the bar council has approved, the ratio is 1:40, whereas in UPS it is 26:1. So for every 26 students we have got one faculty. We've got about 76 permanent faculties and more than 100 lawyers, the most eminent legal firms coming, the lawyers from these legal firms coming to our campus, who are regularly a part of our academic deliverance. They are, interacting with our students, and needless to say that, they are integral part of our placements also. So all the top legal firms of the country are coming regularly for placements. Our placements, if I talk about, they are 86%, and this is one of the only few universities. Am I audible? Because I don't know if I'm audible. Am I?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Charu, you can
Hello?
go ahead. Yes.
Okay, 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 okay. Thank you. So when I was talking about the placements, this is one of the very few universities which gives a placement support to every student for about 5 years, and not only the passing year students. So supposedly you got placed this year from our university, and after 2 years you want to come back to us for a lateral placement. We support your lateral placement as well. And secondly, if you want to start your own law firm, if you're a first generation lawyer and you want to set up your own law firm, we help you in that. We give you a free space in the co-working. We have got a tie-up pan India, so we give you a free space. At the same time, we give you a loan of around 10 lakh rupees to start up your venture. We give you all the technical know-how, all the business intelligence and inputs to start up your law firm, connectivity, alumni network. This is how we empower our students to become entrepreneurs and start their own law firms. So this is a fantastic place when it comes to placements. All the top legal firms in the country, the corporates are coming. There are more than 560 companies coming to our campus every year for placements. So this is absolutely a fantastic opportunity when it comes to using your using UPS as a launch pad to your career. Talking about our tie-up, we have recently done a tie-up with University of Law UK, and this is the oldest university in Europe. And if you talk about the British Parliament, for past 100 years, most of the celebrated parliamentarians are from this university. So we have got several level of exchange programs, and students are going there, and their faculties are coming and taking courses with our students. So there's a lot of interaction at the student level as well as the faculty level. One very unique thing about when I was talking about the faculty, and I said there are 76 permanent faculty with us. One thing very unique about us is that we do not only provide internship to our students, we also provide internship to our faculty. It's very important for the faculty to remain updated with what is happening in the industry. So we send our faculty to work in the law firms and work in the corporates and work in the cyber companies, so that they come back to us much more updated with what's happening in the industry. So that's again a very big plus point, that our faculty is not only academically oriented, and not that they have got a background of working in the corporates and working in the government machinery. They are continuously updating and upgrading in their learning experiences, because law, as you know, is getting very wide. It's getting wider day by day, as our experiences are growing in different domains. So wherever there is a human interaction, intervention, you would find that law is applicable. So as the field is growing, similarly the experience of our faculty is growing, because they are regularly um, going there in the industry, updating themselves. So that's another very important point. Talking about the specializations of our university, I don't see any university, including the national law universities in the country, having these kind of specializations. So we have got five areas. We have got a BBA law, BA law, and we've got a BTech law. And particularly, if I talk about BTech law, we are the only in the country who are offering a 6 years program with a law degree as well as a BTech degree. So in cyber laws and intellectual property rights, we offer these programs. And 4 years you're going to study computer science, and 2 years it's going to be cyber laws. That's how the program is designed. We've got some very interesting programs. Talking about when our university started some 16 years ago, we were known, initially we were known to be a university, one of its kind, for programs for energy. So when it comes to energy laws, we are the number one in entire Asia. So, and I don't need to, though it is a COVID scenario, the oil and gas sector has really gone down. But if you look at conventionally, this is one of the most rewarding sectors, and there have been wars and strategies all over the world to actually, over oil and energy. You're well aware of that. So, it's a very rewarding career to have, a specialization in laws and energy. So we are number one in that. Talking about some very other interesting programs like medical and forensic sciences laws. So, there are n number of medical cases where, people file cases when there are deaths and some malpractices. So you need to have a very specialized understanding. Of course, this is under the BSc law program. So we've got these kind of programs. Then we have got a very entertaining and a very, I would say, thrilling kind of a program, which is media and entertainment laws. So with all the Netflixes coming into the world and all the web series, and of course you have got all the Bollywood and several TV channels. So there's a huge scope of lawyers in the media and entertainment field. So that's what we offer. Similarly, we've got health and food and environmental laws program. So other than the conventional ones like the constitutional law, criminal law, labor laws, so of course those are there. So we've got around exactly 560 seats all put together. We've got approximately 3,000 students studying in the campus right now. And as I told you, it is one of the most beautiful campuses. You can Google that and see the beautiful pictures of our campus. And one thing very important, we have got We are offering to every student, MI and AI programs. That's a compulsory part. As you know, that technology and legal studies are going hand in glove all across the world. So you really need to be really updated on the technical front. We have tied up with Coursera, and more than 3,900 courses to our students from Coursera come absolutely free. So that's another very big advantage of studying with UPES. So, and the faculties, every student has one mentor. That's another very important feature, and with that mentor right from the beginning helps the student to build up his career. So very strategically, we are monitoring career of every student, and not only the career, the overall personality. So we've got Dale Carnegie programs. We've got two programs, one at the beginning of the session, and one program at the end of the session when you're actually going for your placements. So these are Dale Carnegie programs, and they're all aiming at your personality development and helping you to face all the personal and professional challenges of life. So that's the kind of involvement the university has, the commitment the university has for the students. And as I already told you, being a part of GUS, we encourage a lot of exchange programs of our students with the universities we have abroad. So there's a lot of exposure which is happening at the student level. Now coming to the admission process, uh, our last date to apply is 20th of June. Howsoever, I will suggest that you please apply as early as possible. If you're interested, you can even apply today. So you have to go online, and I'm sure IMS also can help you with the link. Otherwise, you can go directly also and apply online, and just our exam. If you're going through our exam pathway, then we have the ULSAT. That's the name of our exam, which is on 27th, from 27th of June to 29th of June. This is going to be a 2 hours online paper. You're going to do the paper in your house. Howsoever, you will be proctored, so it's going to be a restricted environment at your own place. So you can take this test. If supposedly you don't want to take this test, we are going to also consider your CLAT scores this year. So when it comes to taking the CLAT scores, so we take CLAT scores up to 15, the rank of 15,000. Then we also take the LSAT scores. So you can also apply through LSAT. So these are the three ways you can actually, apply, appear for the LSAT, sorry, UPS seat. And we also have number of scholarships with us. The most important scholarship I would like to share is for the girl students. So across all the years of your studying with us, your tuition fee is waived off up to 25%. This is particularly for the girl child, and this is under a program. This is under a program called Shakti. Now, Shakti is a program which is not only for students, but it is for also the employees of UPS, and we have also extended this program to corporates across the country. So, a lot of emphasis is being given to, increase the participation of students, girl students in all these spheres, and also in law, of course. So, we're wanting more and more girls to actually, be professionally ready. So whether it is our management program, whether it is our BTech program, law program, we are encouraging girl students not only by giving scholarships, but then there are a number of leadership programs which are also offered to girls. So it is something. Now coming to about the fees part, uh, the approximate fees is going to be 16 lakhs 48,000. That's going to be the fees, and in the BTech program it is slightly more. It is somewhere around 17 lakhs 50,000 rupees. The details of the fees are given over there. You are going to get the you will easily get the education loan also if you're interested for going through the loan procedure. So, and for any queries regarding your admission, regarding applying, you can directly reach out to me, and you can also reach out to Tushar. I'm going to give, I'm going to share my number. So kindly note down if you're interested in reaching out to me for any query. So my number is 941 541 4871. I repeat, 941 541 4871. And my email ID is charu dot SRIVASTAVA charu.srivastava at gus dot I'm sorry, it is charu.srivastava at the rate gus India GUS gus
Charu,
India.
there is a chat box there. You can type all of this over there.
Okay.
Yeah, just type it. You can also leave Ashutosh's contact details over there. Yeah.
Sure. And meanwhile, while I'm talking to the students, Tushar, quickly do that, please.
Yeah,
Leave
if
your
Tushar
number,
can do
my
it,
number,
you can
and
continue talking.
Dr. Ashutosh's number.
Yeah.
So, coming to you can directly reach out to me, and it is one of the finest universities. It's a truly global university in terms of experience, in terms of faculty, in terms of even one thing I would like to add: we have got a lot of sports facilities. Our students have won more than 210 awards. Our students are participating in moot court competitions, and they're going globally, participating in a lot of programs. So it's a very fun kind of an environment which we have, culturally very rich environment which we have. So I welcome all of you to UPS. It's a wonderful platform to be one of the. Thank you all, and hopefully see you soon. And just remain connected for any queries you have. Thank you, Kamlesh. Thank you, students. And I'm sure you're going to make the best out of this COVID period in terms of learning and watching movies, simultaneously preparing for your CLAT. So do very well. Take good care of your health. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Charu. That was very enlightening. And guys, nobody's going anywhere. You have to still answer the questions of the students. Okay. So anyway, I mean, I quite enjoyed listening to you. I mean, one important factor is that you get international exposure, which is in a globally connected world, which is critical and important. The second interesting thing was the fact that, let me ask you that question. It's a live-in campus, so a student has to live in the university itself?
Yeah. So we have, it's a living campus. We have got hostels over there.
Right.
And just in case we are not able to accommodate all students, we have got several private hostels around our campus also.
Right.
So living is not an issue.
Yeah, because it's very important for the students to live there, when they are studying,
Yes.
because that is what creates the whole fun part that you spoke about. Who wants to
Definitely.
study in any case, Charu?
Yeah.
We have to enjoy.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one thing very important which I forgot to mention, we got fantastic food over there.
You got swimming pool?
Sorry?
Swimming pool?
Swimming pool is
You
there.
have a swimming pool?
Yes, we
Okay.
do have a swimming pool. We have got.
And there's a bar also over there next to the pool?
That I
No.
don't think so, but very good, food and canteens are there.
Yeah.
Very nice food.
Okay, can I come to the technical
We are
questions?
very conscious about giving variety.
Okay, can I come to the technical questions?
So, and then
Charu?
there's
Can I come to the technical
Sorry?
questions
Sorry?
the students have asked? Yeah, okay, first is...
yeah, please. I think technical is
So
what
what is
exactly
the
is it
fee
related
of
to law?
UPES law?
So I told you it is going to be approximately 16 lakhs 48,000 is the course fee altogether.
All the 5 years.
Yes, of course. So approximately it's going to be 3 lakhs something annually.
Okay.
That's going to be the fee. And
Okay.
for the BTech program, it's going to be about 1.5 lakhs more. So if you go to the website, you will get the exact breakup and everything. And I can also share it with the IMS team, and that can be shared.
Sure. Okay, another question is, do we have to select our specialization in the first year?
The specialization selection happens in the third year.
Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
sixth
Here's a
semester.
question from Sneha Roy. She says, ma'am, I'm taking the CLAT and I see that there is a non-examination pathway through CLAT. So still do I have to apply for
Yeah.
UPS, like fill a form or just give the CLAT?
No. She has to apply. She can skip the score part where we are asking for the scores. She has to ignore that right now, and she has to apply right now for UPS, and she can choose the non-exam pathway.
Okay. And she's asking whether there's a negative marking in a ULSAT.
There is a negative marking, and the paper pattern has changed this particular year because of the COVID scenario. So we are reducing the time. It is going to be 2 hours paper, a proctored paper, and approximately 150 questions. So that is, if she goes to the website, she can check all these details.
Okay, fantastic. Now, there is a, does UPS provide internship?
Yes, as I told you that we have got internships in India as well as abroad. So every student goes for 1 month of internship in these 5 years. You can also go for more internships, and if you want to go abroad and do the internships in any of the universities where GUS has a presence, we offer you a 1 month free internship. And in India, of course, as I told you, more than 100 legal experts from the top law firms come to our campus regularly. They're an integral part, and a lot of uh, uh, I would say, they are a part of our advisory board also. So they do take a lot of students for internships regularly. So that's
Okay.
not an issue.
Okay, now can I go to Professor Ashutosh? Ashutosh, sir, there is a question. It's a little tricky, but you'll have to answer it. If I get into both NUJS and UPES, which one should I choose?
It will depend a lot of things, but of course, if you go everything, I think US will be better with UPS, to be frank.
That's a very candid answer. Thank you very much, Professor Ashutosh. That was very nice. There are students who still want to learn from what you were talking about. So there is an anonymous attendee. Unfortunately, they have not written their name. What is the difference between due process of law and process established by law?
So as I told you that in Indian Constitution, Article 21, if we read, it say that no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except by a procedure established by law, which means you can deprive someone's life and liberty by a process which is given in any of law. So for example, if you commit a murder, then you can't say that I will not be hanged, because IPC is saying if you commit a murder, then you can be hanged. That is the process which is given in the IPC. Similarly, if you commit a crime, you will be sent to the jail. Then you can't say that my liberty is being infringed. Whereas the Constitution of USA is using the term due process of law. It says that no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except by a due process of law. So the main difference between procedure established by law and due process of law is that in both the cases, we need a law to deprive someone's life and liberty. In both the cases, we need a law to deprive someone's life and liberty. But the main difference lies is that there's one question to have a law, and there's another question whether the law is just or unjust. So what happened in the case of Menka Gandhi is that there was a law which say that your passport can be impounded without giving you any reason. So government on a fine day can go to your house, take away your passport, and the moment the passport is being taken, you will not be able to go abroad. And going abroad is a part of my liberty. But the government is saying that I am doing through it's a procedure established by law. But in this case, the Supreme Court is saying that your procedure established by law is not a good thing. It should be interpreted with a due process of law. Why? Because there should be a law and that law must be just. As I gave you example of, if you commit a theft of rupees 100, if you commit a theft of rupees 100, you can't send to a jail for 10 years. Suppose the IPC is saying, if you commit a theft of rupees 100, you will be in jail for 10 years. So So if we go by procedure established by law, it is satisfying the requirement, because the law is there which say that if you commit a theft of ₹100, you will be sent to a jail. But if you ask any common person, they will say that also say that this law is unreasonable. This law is unjust, because see the comparison. I took a theft of ₹100 and the punishment is 10 years. There is no justification for the punishment. So law must be reasonable. The law must be just. That is what makes the difference between procedure established by law and due process of law. In due process of law, we need a law, and that law must be just and reasonable. Who will determine whether the law is just or not? The Supreme Court.
Excellent.
Supreme Court.
Excellent. So there is another student. He is, I don't know what, Khushwant Nimbark. I don't know whether he's still there or not, but he's just put a line saying Mandal Commission case. I don't know what he means. Does it mean that's an important?
Indra Sahni case is also known as the Mandal Commission case.
So you already touched upon it.
But this case is also known as Mandal Commission case because the whole case arose out of a Mandal Commission report, which was sent to the VP Singh government when he was the Prime Minister, and he recommended reservation for OBC of 27%. That is way back in 1989.
Okay, now there is Rishabh Bharti. He says all these judgments that you are discussing, I mean, I enjoyed it, okay? But he's saying, will they also help in the CLAT preparation? Will they be a part of the GK law?
Of course, that's what I'm saying, that what I picked those judgments from the inception of the Supreme Court, and I included even those judgments which have come just recently. So I think all these judgments are very, very relevant for any examination.
Okay, can I ask you a question? How critical is the knowledge of the language English for legal studies?
It is good, but at the end of the day, the whole thing of the English and everything in law, of course, you have a communication and everything. But at the end of the day, the good thing about law is that how you are going to interpret it. Because
Right.
the same provision of law can be interpreted in different 10 types of time.
You can also look up the dictionary anytime that you want. No, for example, you know, a bet can mean ante and all of these. You can look up the dictionary. It doesn't matter
But
much.
main thing is that
And the logic. I think it's very logical also. Yeah, isn't it? Yeah.
Law is more about logic and common sense.
Right. Absolutely. It is a simple thing. So there is Meghalina Mukherjee. She says an anonymous hacker called Elliot Anderson has already come forward to the government with the bugs in the app. Now, Meghalina, I think that guy has only put the bugs. Okay, so there is something known as ethical hacking, and there is the other way around also. But never mind, let the prop answer. Yeah.
No, one thing is that, for example, last year, if you remember, in the election, many people are saying that EVM can be hacked and everything. So some people sitting in London say that I can hack the EVM. But when the election commission is asking him to come forward and do it before me, it's saying that I can hack it, and doing the hacking in front of the viewer, it's a completely different thing. Even I can say that there's some problem in the Aarogya Setu and everything. But if you have all the evidence, all the information, you can come forward and give a detail that to the government that how this can be hacked and everything.
Excellent. So there is a question here by an anonymous attendee on the scholarship thing. Is the scholarship for girls in general or based on yearly performance?
No,
and 25% on the full 5-year course. That's what she's asking.
That is general for every course, for every 5 years.
For every 5 years. Oh, okay. Okay, guys, you have been also asking whether Christ is good, NLU is good, NLS is good. I'll answer that. My suggestion is very simple. You have to apply to multiple places which are good. Okay. And once you have all the admissions in your hand, that's the time you have to take a call whether I need to go here or whether I need to go there. And I think we should thank Professor Ashutosh Tripathi, who has been very candid for the first question that I asked between NJUS and UPS. And he very candidly said you can go to NJUS. You see, this question was asked by another in another forum. There's an INSEAD. INSEAD is a global business school. It's the top business school in the world after Harvard. And Singapore Management University. So the gentleman from Singapore Management University said, please go to INSEAD. It has a better brand name. So it's okay. So guys, if you want to ask these questions, we are absolutely open to the idea and nobody will lie to you. Nothing is good or bad. It's just that the opportunity will come only after you have applied, only after you have been selected. Now, for example, if you get selected by NJUS and rejected by UPS, then that question is moot, right? Or the other way around, the question is moot. So Next, don't worry about that. Let's worry about. Now, the one surprise I know many students have left is that they really enjoyed your presentation on the important cases, because it is also a part of the CLAT and probably the UPS exam and maybe in the LCAT India also, LSAT India also. So can I make a request on behalf of the students? One can coordinate with Piali, and if they have liked it so much, what they can do is we will send them a what shall I call, a poll, and they can tell us whether they want us to conduct your session again and you to give them more tips on the law, the important cases, and how relevant they are going to be to the examination. If you are open to the idea, we are open to the idea if the students want it.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. No issue.
Right. So, guys, it was fantastic to have Professor Ashutosh Tripathi over here. It is phenomenal that Charu was here to explain everything. Tushar, thank you very much for backing both your colleagues over here on this chat, and students, you were fantastic. Right? Am I missing out on any question? Because somebody is raising a hand suddenly. Okay, no. All right. So then I wish you the very best, and we can do this again. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye-bye, and thank you so much. Thank you, Kamlesh. Thank you, all the students. Thank you, Dr. Ashutosh. Bye-bye.
Thank you, man. Bye.
See you. Take
Bye.
care.